How you doing?
Hi, Andy. It's good to talk.
It's good. Thanks for popping back on. It's always good to have a range of people on, and very rarely do most podcasts in cryptozoology or the paranormal have somebody on that just deals, with a matter of fact animals that are known to science in an everyday way. But there's something, I suppose, quite important about what you do, because even though you do deal with animals that are known to science, you deal with animals that aren't supposed to be here in this country, or are exotics that have escaped. So that gives you a sort of, I suppose, an edge as a researcher, almost, because you're out there looking for things that aren't usually found in the country. And that, to me, I think that's an important crossover to what we feel we're trying to do in the cryptozoology community.
Yes, indeed. Well, it's like I've said before, it's always been a bit of a begrudging bolt on to cryptozoology, really. You're not talking about cryptids particularly. You're talking about animals that are just not at home. And there's very obvious reasons for that. I mean, we have a history in exploring the mysterious and the more obscure. But yeah, certainly these days our work is with National Exotics Animal Rescue Services, and it is indeed exactly what it sounds, exactly what it says on the tin, as mundane as that.
Well, you say mundane, but I mean, really,
not boring. I didn't say boring.
Yeah, not boring. Raccoons, exotic snakes, parrots, birds.
Yeah.
The raccoon dogs are always heading off around the country every few years or so. There's always a couple of those guys running about on there and the like. But also, you have stepped, I suppose, in a public way into the area, into the genre of British big cats, mystery big cats, and you had a very interesting. I thought it was a very interesting and very well thought out article on the subject in the country that a lot of big cat chasers, I guess, probably didn't like.
The recent Welsh one, was it?
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, tell us a little bit more about that, your opinions on the phenomena and its commonality. Is it something that exists in the UK in your opinion, number one? Two, if it does exist, to what extent does the phenomena exist? Is it like hundreds like people say there are, or we're talking about one or two strays getting out and wandering around the place from time to time?
I think that's the crux of the matter, isn't it, really? I mean, I see animals that shouldn't be in the UK wandering around the UK every day, or hear about them, or see videos of them or pictures of them. Any animal that's kept as a pet or in captivity can escape or be released. That's the bottom line. Whether they're held legally or illegally, those options are there. So it would be naive to suggest that there's no way there could be any big cats out there. And there is very well documented factual history with actual evidence of big cats being found in the UK that were traced back to releases and escapes or whatever. And it's quite likely that some of those may still have offspring out there, and that is that's one part of the equation. The issue that I kind of take exception to is the suggestion that we have thriving populations, because of course that's not in isolation. You can't just say we've got thriving population of leopards, whoopee. You'd also have to say in the same breath, we must have thriving populations of puma, and we must have thriving populations of lynx, and we must also have thriving populations of some of the other smaller jungle cats that have been cited too. That's becoming a bit incredulous for me, and it relies solely on the evidence of eyewitness sightings, which are notoriously unreliable. my comparison, my most recent comparison, if you like, is to suggest that the sighting reports that are put out there with photographic evidence and with video evidence are nonsense. So we can make some assumptions about those sighting reports that don't carry video or picture evidence with them as well. I have spoken to some people on Facebook, and I've taken conversations offline with them because they've genuinely piqued my interest, and I think there's some genuine reports out there. I think Facebook does a huge disservice to the whole genre, to be honest with you, and the Facebook groups. Whereas I don't want to sound elitist about this, but you would have thought it would be a really good platform for collating information, but it's just a platform for people to say, oh, you've seen one, have you? I've seen two. And then someone else will say, well, I've seen three. And then before you know it, someone said, well, I see them regularly on a regular basis. I know how many they are. They've got cubs. I see them every time I'm out walking the dog. And you just go, no, you don't. You don't, because we don't.
Because where are the photographs? And I suppose that element is so.
We don't live in Narnia to start with,
No.
And there's people who claim similar things about other creatures, which
of course, and I understand that too.
Yeah, and I need to take it all with a pinch of salt. But like I say, there have been cases that we've been involved in recent times that I've had investigators on the case, and I've collated information, and we've interviewed plenty of witnesses over the years.
Yeah.
So we're not dismissive of the suggestion of there still being big cats out there. I've spoken to rangers within the New Forest, Cannock Chase, places like that, who say, we do think there may be one or two still out there. These are serious people. I'm in conversations with representatives of DEFRA and APA, who have a similar sort of very matter of fact.
That's their opinion as well. They think there's a smattering of these cats around the country. I mean, these cats would have a wide territory as well. We're talking 20 miles or more, aren't we? So
males could potentially have a huge territory. It would only be defined by the presence of another male, really.
Okay.
If there were two or three females scattered around, then I guess a male cat could have seasonal territories and wander a huge area potentially, if that were the case. But I don't even know how viable that is. It's all speculation, to be honest with you. Clearly, the cats that were released tied to the advent of the DWA coming in, which is often cited, and I think reasonably, but it shouldn't be treated in isolation. And of course, it's only used for big cats. Nobody thinks about all the other animals that were kept without dangerous wild animals license, which then needed them. So what happened to all of those?
That came up recently, and I thought, well, that's a good point. I mean, not that something like wallabies would be an example of that because they're not dangerous, but wallabies being established in pockets throughout the country actually has been a very interesting thing to me. It was a new thing to me when I was writing Piece of Britain to say wallabies, like, really?
Yeah,
but insignificant. Really, are they? I mean, of course, you get calls about escaped wallabies that are in fact wild wallabies.
Well, we've dealt with. Often you don't know, of course. You can only make an assumption. We made an assumption along those lines recently, and we were involved in the recapture of a wallaby up in the northeast. And there's a couple more cases in the southeast as well currently. And it's hard to tell because, we've had them spotted still as potential wild animals. And generally speaking, there's no history of wild populations of wallabies wandering into urban areas. So that's really the only way to make a
Okay, so that's the
intelligent.
clincher. If it's in a neighborhood, it's probably a pet.
Yeah, someone's probably chucked it out, or it's escaped, and they don't really want to draw too much attention to it. We've had cases in the past where we've got responsible owners who are trying to help with the recapture, but as with any animal that goes missing, sometimes people don't want to draw attention to it. They don't want to be seen to be responsible. They don't want to be liable for the fines.
Yeah, that was something I wondered about. Is that often what's behind some of these big cat sightings? I don't know how prevalent the keeping illegal ownership of big cats is in England and Wales now, or in Scotland, but in Ireland I heard it was still quite a big problem.
It's less like the Wild West out there, to be honest with you. I mean,
there's no law against it.
No, I think it will change fairly soon, but no, it's madness. But I think that's a bit of a red herring, to be honest with you. I don't think there's any way that anyone is going to the lengths and the finances and the logistics of acquiring a big cat illegally, only to release it. I mean, there's some suggestion that there's still some deliberate releasing going on. I think that's nonsensical.
That's hard to believe. I mean, I would think that we were looking at the descendants of those original releases in the 1970s, assuming that they took place. We know 1 or 2 did, but assuming that it was more widespread. Well, my assumption would be that's what we're looking at. I mean, what are we looking at for a litter of a leopard or a puma?
You're not
2, 3 individuals?
Litters. No, you're not. Yeah, you're not talking huge litters, and then of course they've all got to survive, and surviving in non-ideal conditions, generally speaking. Some people seem to suggest that these animals will just simply adapt to life in the UK, and that clearly depends on how long they've been in captivity as well. If it's a very old animal that's used to being hand-fed on rump steak, then it isn't going to go and just take down a deer, not without being fatally wounded, I wouldn't have thought. So it's not going to survive just because it's a big cat, which is why we have far better survival rate for animals that can survive by scavenging. Your raccoons and your raccoon dogs and stuff like that, they can scavenge, and they can eat small things, and they can survive pretty well on just digging up worms and berries and stuff like that. But an animal that needs to have
pack on the pounds,
vast amounts of protein on a regular basis, it's a different ball game completely. I mean, I think to be honest with you, what is more likely and what is a reality is the amount of exotic cat breeds that are so popular these days.
Talking about the savannah style cats and the
well, your savannah breeders, certainly anyone that's producing F1 savannahs will have a serval. Servals are available in black. Savannahs are available in black. In fact, they're a stunning animal in black. They are actually here. They are being utilised as part of the exotic pet trade in a way that pumas and leopards.
We have one nearby. That lady walks it in the park with the dog walkers. It's got a little harness and a lead on it and everything, and it's stand about. I guess it's just above my knee, I suppose, a large one. And I mean, sure, from a distance, if that was black and I saw it, and of course, the trick with cats is, especially big cat sightings from a distance, is without something for scale, big cats look a lot like little cats when you don't know what distance you're looking at them from.
They certainly do to everyone on Facebook, don't they? Yeah,
they do, and I've seen quite a few. The one I think that probably gets me the most, and something to clear up with a lot of people, is the cat prints. And the first thing I'm looking for is those claws, right? Dog claws, obviously. And time and time, it's almost like the sticks and stones to the Bigfoot phenomena. People say, big cat, big cat, big cat. And a basic search on Google for, just to get an understanding of a very basic appearance of big cat paw prints would be amazing. And yet No. Dogs and dogs and dogs and dogs again and again. I have seen a few that are very convincing, but again, quite a few of those clearly could have fitted into the savannah portion.
Likely. I mean, I just think we need to think about what's more realistic and what's actually out there. You know, we do deal with escaped savannas. We do deal with a lot of agencies that are responsible for feral cat populations. It is a fact that exotic breeds are finding their way into feral populations.
Oh, really?
And there's evidence of much bigger cats. You know,
because
so
of the crossbreed between the exotics and the feral cats.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the gene pool within feral cat populations, once you start adding exotic breeds to it, you know, the prospect of some sort of throwback or whatever, depending on what mixture is there, is immense, really. You know, anything can be thrown up. With there being no arguments that, you know, melanistic cats are very common in domestic trade, so that isn't a sticking point at all. So the sticking point for me is, you know, when people start talking about leopards, really, because
in viable population sizes, that's what we're talking
well,
about.
yeah, you know, certainly in population sizes that are viable enough for 2,500 sighting reports a year. Yeah.
Is it that many?
Well, yeah, I've heard different figures, and to be honest with you, I'm sure it is guesswork. I'm sure it's exaggerated to some extent by some people. I'm just thinking, you on this on the Skype, you don't record all my notifications flashing up, does it?
No, not at all. No. Well, I've only got
that
my
is the
view of you.
downside to me using my phone, I'm afraid.
No,
but it does keep me off it. I also can't see you at the moment. Is that deliberate?
No, I'm on the screen.
I haven't got you on screen.
Oh, I'm definitely here.
I don't know whether that makes a difference to the record.
It might be the setting you've got your camera on. If you can just see yourself in a little square, maybe you don't have it on full screen. If you change it to full screen, which you can do by just clicking back on the Skype button here on the side. Now you've disappeared. You're gone now, Mike. I mean, you're just still here, but your picture has disappeared. You're still with us.
I haven't got you on the. I haven't got you on screen now. Go to call. Oh, right. I'm on big screen.
Did you say you're using the pad?
No. I have to use my phone for some reason. The pad.
Okay.
Wasn't active.
That's fine.
So anyhow, yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Well, no, that's very interesting. I know, just to chuck something on the back that occurred to me actually when you were saying that, was that a lot of reports I've got from people with no skin in the game, actually, now I've got a lot of big Black Panther, Black Leopard reports from people who've very clearly seen them, but a lot of the reports I've had, they've said something unusual. It was about 2 feet long, it was about knee high, it was all black. I've never seen anything so big in the cerval, or when you mentioned some of the melanistic savannas getting into the feral population, often they've been reported. A farmer called me from Yorkshire, said that there was often one in his field hunting rabbits because there were warrens there, but it was only knee high and only about 2 foot long. And he said to me, but it looked mature. It didn't look like a juvenile. And that stuck with me for a long time. First of all, I wondered if they were perhaps some elements of the population were getting smaller due to inbreeding or something like that. And then the savannah aspect popped into my head. I thought perhaps this is what we're looking at. Some of these reports, not all. I've had some pretty hefty close-up sightings.
It's far more likely. I mean, if you listen to a lot of people on Facebook, of course, they'd obviously suggest that our leopard population has actually grown a little bit more human friendly as well, so that
Oh, really?
they wouldn't dream of attacking a person or a pet. That's they're just displaying atypical leopard behavior because it suits the agenda. But I think it suits the agenda because they're not leopards more often than not.
I only think this is why they're less frightened of the people, the ones that are seen. Moving on from that, I think that that's a really good overview of that. I think it's a strong theory. Invasive species. I'm very interested in invasive species that become so endemic that we accept them as a natural part of the fauna of the United Kingdom, like the grey squirrel, like the Canada goose. And I was in Bushy Park near Hampton Court recently. That's near where I live, and there's a beautiful park there. You walk through, and there's fish and ducks and herons and all those lovely parrots, the rosary parakeets. And suddenly I see a crow pecking away at something in the corner, that's trying to nip its legs. And I rush over, and there's a huge Chinese midden crab just there near the pond. And of course, Chinese midden crabs, that's an endemic invasive species that's occupied a lot of the Thames. But this is in a park. It's in the middle of a park fighting a crow. And I thought, wow. And I got I'll share it. I got a little footage of it. And I just thought, wow, and this is such a strange phenomenon for the UK to have a crab that's basically in fresh water, surviving in fresh water year round, every year. And it's even, sort of wandering through the field, as it were. What's your knowledge of the invasive species that have become established, or perhaps something that's up and coming that you know about that you think will be endemic in years to come?
Well, I mean, there's quite a list, isn't there? And they keep adding to it. We tread a thin line here, in all fairness, because the options for them are very limited, as you might imagine. So we have to be fairly careful with what we say we're doing with stuff, and places that deal with certain invasive species are few and far between. Even just grey squirrels, it's become more difficult to find anyone with a license. But we're not pest controllers.
No.
And we will never fill that role. Even for crabs and crayfish and stuff, we're not going down that road. But we put animal welfare first and foremost.
Yeah.
And if we can help an animal, we will. So that at times causes us dilemmas. I have to say. I mean, I think there's some very real concerns that recently, I'd say recent, in the past few years, animals like tanuki, raccoons, that have been subject to the legislation could possibly become established. There never used to be any risk of that before the legislation. I must admit, the legislation certainly topped it off and made it far more likely, which is not something to be proud of or impressed by.
Because it intensifies the cost it makes it prohibitive, the cost of keeping these creatures, right?
Well, to be honest with you, it's the issues came from breeders, to be honest with you, and unfortunately within the exotic pet trade, then the breeding of species is usually done with those that are easiest bred, that can sell quick and make a fast buck.
Okay.
And that will attract the less scrupulous of breeders. And when you're talking about animals like tanukis, then they are prolific breeders. You get large litters from them potentially, and they saw the market basically falling, and they knew there wasn't anything that could be done about it. So they were.
I see.
So they were knocking them out to people at markets. There's a market near me that was selling them, and they were like, you know, I know £20 for a pair.
Wow.
Just dogs, just keep them like dogs. You know, they just look just like raccoons, but you can keep them just like dogs. And then, you know, obviously these animals grow up and people realise they've made a horrible mistake and come home and the house is destroyed. But I mean, the changes to the legislation in terms of people who had them, pre-legislation change. I mean, I'm in that boat, I suppose. There's not really any cost implications since the legislation changed. The only difference would be that if you, I mean, basically you'd have to live in a scenario where you should never have had one in the first place. You know, it's like people that live in bed sits that have dogs and stuff. You know, if you put yourself in that position, then you know it's not a great one for the animal. So Tanukis were no longer able to be taken out for walks. They're not supposed to be house pets. They're supposed to have a secure enclosure. They're not supposed to be able to escape from the immediate perimeter. So basically, you need a secure yard or garden, and they need an outdoor enclosure, which may have added costs to a lot of people. But to be honest with you, not many people actually kept a tanuki as a house pet. Anyone that knew what tanukis were about was usually put off from doing that to start. It was only the unsuspecting and the very,
because they look cute. I guess they're a good-looking animal, and
indeed. And they can be, you know, they can be kept just like dogs. You can be lucky and you can get a very tame one and you can keep it as a house pet, and you know it can be wonderful. But that's generally the exception to.
But you're basically saying they need to be treated like wild animals that are kept in a, you know, in a secure setting, not as a house pet, not as man's best friend, so to speak.
That's mainly the legislation. They need to be kept from a setting they can't escape from. So you need to make sure they can't just run out when you open your door type thing. So yeah, you know that. But in terms of them being a wild animal, you know, the only ones available in the UK, of course, for many years are captive bred ones, which are used to people. So they are exactly the same as their wild counterpart, of course. They haven't suffered like dogs and cats have. They're not mutants, but so they are, you know, the same animal.
You're basically saying they need a bit of careful handling, and if you're not up for that task, then they're not just going to be some cute pet you could run to place. I remember seeing, I think it was a lady, local cafe, that was petting an African hedgehog.
Oh, right, yes.
Apparently that's a very popular pet now as well. Quite a docile hedgehog species to have. And I just thought, really, I mean, do you really need this? You know, it seems strange to me. It seems strange that such a thing is going up.
They're not bad as pets, in all fairness, but we are recently dealing with a lot that need homes because, again, you know, they go through trends. I was only saying the other day, really, when you restrict the amount of exotic pets available, exotic mammals, anyhow, which is predominantly the case, then people will go for the options that were available, the options that are still left for them. So you know,
and has there been a huge new restriction on exotic mammals?
Well, in terms of the invasive species legislation, you've got stuff like raccoons, koalas, raccoon dogs, chipmunks taken off the list. They were popular. So at the moment, we're dealing with a lot of skunk cases because I think a lot of people gravitated to skunks. So skunk breeders bred more skunks. So consequently, we've got more skunks running around loose. And that's not a coincidence. You know, you can see the trend there, really.
So what kind of numbers are we talking about, though, Mike? I mean, is it ones and twos, or, you know, 3, 4 a year, something like that, for skunks?
Well, currently we've got, I think, 5 active skunk cases.
Wow.
yeah. The tanuki cases have really dropped off. You know, whether that means that the tanukis that escaped that we didn't capture have now established themselves as wild animals and are just elusive,
Okay.
or whether the jaguars have eaten them all, I don't know. Or Bigfoot, of course.
Yeah, well, they love tanukis, don't they? Toasted, preferably.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would have thought that was the case. I remember my very first Bigfoot sighting actually in the UK.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. Do you want to hear about it?
Yes. This is a joke, isn't it? Go on, go ahead.
No, it's not a joke.
Oh, it's real.
It's not a joke. Yeah, as you know, I was a psychiatric nurse for many years, and it goes back to I think I must have been a student nurse. So you go back like nearly 40 years, and I trained in an old Victorian asylum in just outside of Leeds, and to get to it, I was driving over country roads lined with dry stone walls. Effectively middle of nowhere, went up a big hill, coming down the other side of a big hill, and big long stretch of road. It must be about a mile to a mile and a half long, straight road, no turns off or anything like that. So I'm just going down this hill. It's about 6:30 in the morning, and I saw this creature standing probably about 3/4 of the way down the hill, looking straight at me. It must have been standing 7 to 8 foot tall. You've heard this before. It was covered in brown, shaggy hair. It was looking straight towards me, so I couldn't distinguish any facial features, but it was looking directly at me. So bipedal. And as I got nearer to it, I found myself being completely unable to distinguish what it was. And I've always been involved with animals, or at least interested in animals all my life. I couldn't tell what this was. And I must admit, it reached the point where I thought, I don't know whether to go past it really quickly or stop and do a 3-point turn and go around them. Because it was really, really weird. And it was only when I got near enough that I could actually see, and again, you're talking about the sort of mid-80s. Not many people kept llama in those days. And even though I went over that hill day in, day out, the people who had the small holding at the side of the road had invested in a llama that was stood with its front legs on the dry stone wall, looking directly at me, so I couldn't distinguish any snout or anything like that. And that's what it was. When I got close to it, I thought, it's fucking llama. And like my heart.
Llama drama.
Yeah. So
I knew that must have been something else, but I knew because I know you.
Well,
and your thoughts on the genre, so I thought, well, there's no way he's seen something.
I did do it the other night, though. Yet again, I threw down the gauntlet. Somebody was offering to be connected to Bigfoot. Anyone that was interested, they would.
Oh.
And I said, I've thrown this gauntlet down many times. I will go out with you. No recording equipment, nothing like that. Obviously unarmed.
Oh, yeah.
I will then, if you convince me, I will then go public and I will speak out.
Was that here in the UK?
Yeah, in support of the existence of these creatures in the UK. I've not had a reply yet.
No, it's strange that. It's the really funny thing because, but it's good because what I find often in the genre is that. And I've said this to quite a few people before. My journey to this has been one of I want to find animals that don't that have not been proved to exist yet, or have been undiscovered, so on and so forth, or animals we think we've lost. Like the thylacine, see if that still exists. So there's a strange thing in that I've attributed, and I love, and you're a psychiatric nurse. I love psychology, so I study psychology books and read all these different bits and pieces all the time. I also studied theology for my degree, and I was going to be a priest all these years ago. And yeah, I know exactly that doesn't work on me. So it's the opposite effect. So, and then years later, I got married to somebody who's Jewish, and who's also into psychiatry and the rest of it. One of the funny things about it is that we've got similar religions, but we can come away with a very different perspective of the same event based upon those religious, outlooks, and it's very educational to see that happening, to get that other view that's not too dissimilar to your own. And in the modern world, there's not a lot of corporate religion, so there is a sort of a gap, and people fill that in with interests. And one of the interests from the Bigfoot side of things, and other bits of cryptozoology, sometimes has philosophical outlook attached to it. Like the way I think they've come from a portal, or that aliens brought them, or it's a flesh and blood animal, whatever it is. And that's why people get so offended. I figured out, because you're insulting their religion, you're offending them and questioning a pseudo-religious belief, and that's why they get mad at you, because you're basically saying, I don't believe your God is the true God. And that sort of irks people.
However, and it's a well-known quote, if people are making extraordinary claims,
absolutely,
then the onus is on them to provide extraordinary evidence if they want people to believe them, and there's no extraordinary evidence. I mean, it's a weird one, really, but even Big Cat has gone like that. That's, I despair sometimes. It's
a lot of arguments, a lot of
can't argue.
Pages,
Can't argue. How dare you? How dare you? I believe in big cats. And it's like, well, what does that mean? It's like saying I believe in foxes or owls or something.
Field mice. I believe in field mice. If you don't believe in field mice, and it's obviously because you're from the government, Mike. Yeah, you're trying to convince us field mice don't exist.
Oh, I've got an anecdote about that. I'm going back. I'm going back a little bit to the more shadowy days of BeastWatch, where the sort of cases we took weren't necessarily flesh and blood creatures.
Okay. Is this the Dimension 5 thing? They had a group, didn't you, for a while?
Well, I don't know about we, but yeah, BeastWatch did. But there was a big cat sighting witness who I was struggling to get out to interview, to be honest with you, because they lived somewhere that I didn't frequent very much, but it was like, generally speaking, my sort of area, northwest. And I got an opportunity to go and visit them, which simply because it coincided with the funeral of a work colleague. It does get funnier than this. But,
so what you tell them?
Yeah. So I'd arranged. I got the train through and stuff to go to the funeral, because quite clearly we were all going to the wake afterwards. And it wasn't particularly sad affair. It was someone who'd long retired. It was an old person who died. Natural causes. There was no sort of expression.
Everybody was going to pay their respects.
So yeah, everyone was just going there to pay the respects for someone that was a really good colleague. And I'd arranged with a colleague of mine. I've got this. I didn't go into detail about what it was, but I've got somebody to see after this. Any chance you could drop me off? And he said, well, I'm dropping a few of the lads off back at the train station afterwards. So I'll drop you off on the way. Anyhow, we pulled up outside this woman's house, and this guy had he was showing off really. He recently bought this completely blacked out Range Rover.
Okay.
this brand new, completely blacked out Range Rover.
With your windows and everything.
And I got
Okay.
to the front door, and this woman's jaw just hit the ground, and I thought, what's this about? And I looked round, and because we'd stopped there, the fellas got out for a fag because he wouldn't let them smoke in the car. And there's these 5 guys stood around the car, all with black suits, black tie, white shirts, sunglasses on, and I'm dressed exactly the same. And I thought, oh
and
my
black.
God. and I'm quite convinced she thought I was going to say, you just need to come for a short ride with us. And
you didn't see anything, did you? So what did you see again? I saw nothing.
And I'm going back before Men in Black were aliens. You know, they're aliens or robots now. You can't get a sensible conversation out of anyone, can you? But I just said, I'm sorry, I've just been dropped off. I've just been to a funeral. And the sense of relief on this woman's face. Wow. She must have either thought we were, you know, the real thing, or that we were complete maniacs who
come to shut her up, basically.
Live action role play or something. We just like dressing up to frighten people. But yeah, I mean, the guys that stood by the Range Rover didn't know anything about it. They didn't even know. They wouldn't even have got the joke, to be honest with you. And it was like, oh dear God. And that only came back to me a few weeks ago, and I thought, oh yeah, that was funny. It was a funny moment, briefly funny moment, but I managed to talk my way out of it.
There's lots of wonderful things like it, but it shows you the way that people's minds work. And being a psychiatric nurse, you understand that really well. And you understand when you're talking to somebody that can no longer be reasoned with, right? Yeah. So what do you do in those situations? Because and out of respect for 99.9% of all the people I talk to and all the witnesses I talk to, which is international, it's global, they're very lucid, they're very reasonable. But there is that, 0.0001% where the person is affected in some way, with some delusion of some kind or some mental health issue. Not even always a mental health issue, to be honest with you. Not to put cast aspirations on people who are suffering with that, but they cannot be reasoned with. So how do you normally deal with that from a psychiatric point of view? What do you do when people can't be reasoned with?
I don't think it is necessarily a psychiatric condition. Like I say, it's pretty akin to religious conviction, religious belief in that way. Even though the views, if you write them down or whatever, are quite preposterous in some respect, without any evidence to back it up. But it's a belief system. So arguing against it is futile usually. Somebody wants to set themselves up for ridicule, then I don't think that's an unnatural response. But to be honest with you, but I mean, for example, the extent of sighting reports of whatever, just add animal X to that box,
Nessie or something like that.
Whatever. And we rely on sighting reports from the public all the time, constantly. Obviously, we put posts out there. This has escaped. We need information quickly. Ring this number if you see this animal, type of stuff. Now, I did that a few years ago because I was under the impression my fox had escaped. And this was during the day. Unfortunately, my fox looks a lot like a red fox. Looks a lot like a native species, which kind of confuses what I'm going to say a little bit, but not much. I followed about 8 or 9 eyewitness reports around the local community of I've just seen a fox jump over my back fence. This is the middle of the day. We don't have foxes. It's not like London. We don't have daytime foxes here.
Oh, there's loads of there's tons of them. Yeah.
Definitely, and it varies considerably. We don't have an urban fox issue here. We have foxes on the borders of what becomes countryside.
They're all country foxes.
Well, more or less. I mean, semi-rural at least. And I know that there is one dog fox local to me, and I've seen a couple of other foxes about, and I've got a job that I drive around all hours of the night. You know, so I know there's not loads of them. One person said that they were walking through a park on the side of a busy cycle and footpath, and there was a fox just stood in the bushes watching people. Now, I knew straight away that wasn't my fox because he hates people. But I also thought, that's not a wild fox either. You know, unless it's possibly got toxo, then that's very unusual behaviour in the middle of the day for somewhere that doesn't have a daytime fox population. But I followed lots of sighting reports. Basically, I was out for about 6 hours on foot, going around with a catch pole and chasing these things, only to find that my fox had found a new place to hide. He'd never left his enclosure. He hadn't escaped the secure perimeter. There wasn't any security issues back at home. And I put a post up to this effect, just basically about the validity of sighting reports. And a woman I know said she had the same situation with skunks she had, and she kept a number of skunks outdoors. So they had, for enrichment, they had like a tunnel system dug into the garden and stuff like that. And she said, thought one of her skunks had escaped, and she followed a trail of sighting reports for this skunk that was later just found to have died of natural causes in one of these tunnels in the garden. But lots of sighting reports came in.
So what, psychologically speaking, what is that phenomenon? What is it called that makes people want to join in almost? As you said, it's not always a mental health affectation. And earlier, by the way, I wasn't casting that aspersion onto people, only just to say, as somebody's dealt with people that can't be reasoned with, how do you deal with that? But moving on from that, what is that called when members of the public suddenly say, I haven't seen anything, but I'm just going to answer on this notice board. I'm just going to call into the radio station and say I've seen it. What's that called? Why do people do that?
I spoke to them on the phone. Yeah, I think these people genuinely believe that they'd seen something.
That's what I don't understand. I can't believe that.
I think they thought
it's
they
not
were
conscious.
generally being helpful. It was, it was a conscious decision. I don't think any one of the people I spoke to, certainly, I don't think any of them made the call maliciously or from the point of view of hoaxing it or anything like that. I don't think they hallucinated a fox. I honestly can't explain it, but it just shows you when people say they've seen stuff, it's not necessarily the case that they have, and it doesn't mean they're insane. And I very rarely said someone's insane, but quite clearly the human eye isn't perfect.
No, of course not. But it's also not. It's not. The human eye can record valid sightings and details as well. Now, you mentioned something very important in that respect, really, which was the mistaken sighting of a llama. And you didn't know what you were looking at because it was sort of face on to you. But you couldn't see. I suppose the back legs were on the floor and the front legs were on a wall. At that time, clearly, back in those days, you probably weren't thinking, "Is that a Bigfoot?" Your mind couldn't put together the mental image. And I always talk to people about the Aztecs seeing the Spanish ships and thinking they were floating mountains, because your mind makes up what it knows. It sort of plucks out that part of your mental library that you understand and places it almost sort of as a collage piece over what you're looking at, saying, is that it? Maybe that is that a floating, or is that a Bigfoot or some hairy creature? I'd imagine back then you probably thought that was a guy in a ghillie suit or something weird like that, right?
I don't think I even got that far. But if I'd been driving, across from that and seen it in the distance, I don't know what my imagination would have filled in the gap for. It was only because I was approaching it, couldn't escape from it, and got nearer and nearer until I could identify it, and the animal didn't move. But the other day, the other night actually, unfortunately the motorway was too busy for me to stop, but I saw what appeared to be a big white wolf stood on the verge of the M6.
Wow.
Now, I am sure it was just litter, but I would usually like to have stopped, even if it's on the motorway. If
shoulder, yeah.
If it's empty, and actually even reverse back and just checked it out. But I was going past, it was like 60, 70 miles an hour, and there was a lot of heavy traffic on the. It's Christmas, isn't it? So
yeah,
the wagons all day and all night at the moment. So that was the last time I was on nights, and that's exactly what it looked like.
Wow.
I am convinced it was probably the wrapping that comes off the backs of lorries and what have you. But that's exactly what it looked like for the 2.5 seconds that I saw it. That's the sense my mind made of that sight. And I think it just pays to know how people's minds work, really. That is, we are pattern-seeking mammals, and we will go for
I mean, the reams of pareidolia online will
absolutely,
that speaks to that completely.
We see human faces, we interact with faces, we communicate with faces. It's why we're obsessed with touching animals' faces when they don't like it. But we see faces in clouds and fires, in trees, in rocks and all sorts, because that's how our minds work. That's how our minds make sense of things, and it's not always helpful. It's not always helpful if you're a member of a Bigfoot group or a Dogman group. You really need to change your hobby. But it's and to be honest with you, 99% of them explained away. Very easily in those terms.
I think that's very reasonable. I suppose, and I asked this question to somebody the other day, who attended a lot of Bigfoot conferences, and they actually put on a very fun act in these conferences, with puppets and things like that. It was adult entertainment.
Yeah. Busy recently?
I have. I think you'll interview 8 in about a week, actually. Yes, just get a few in before Christmas. I'll log out then for another 6 months to get back to the book. But obviously, I have to. I talk to a lot of people and investigate a lot of sightings that have previously been recorded as well over the years, and you have to try to get some idea of who that person is, how they feel about certain subjects, what skin they have in the game, Bigfoot on the brain, all that other kind of stuff as well. It doesn't exclude somebody. And I did mention to somebody today, if you're out looking for Bigfoot and you find it, well, that shouldn't invalidate your sighting because you went looking for it. But it does mean that extra proof is needed. You have to validate your whole journey, all the steps you took to get there. The footage, the metadata, you have to submit so much in the way of proof just to have something like that accepted, because you have skin in the game. You found what you were looking for, and you've got a channel or you've got a book or something else like that. And it actually caused me to say a few years ago that I hoped I never did see one. I would hope never to have a sighting, because as soon as I did, I'm not in an objective enough. But my objectivity is gone. Whereas most of the other researchers, I know they're witnesses. I'm not a witness. I've never seen anything I could even class as unusual.
You won't do either. But the people point out to me occasionally, I'm a few months older than the Patterson-Gimlin footage.
Okay.
And I remember seeing that first when I was about 6, something like that, and it terrified me, absolutely terrified me. And I followed that since, to be honest with you, and have reached the stage now that I'm not even going to debate how good a suit it was, or whether that suit was actually achievable in that era, or whether it was even a good suit, to be honest with you, or whether a human being can walk like that. I don't think that's even a valid proposition. I think the most telling aspect of that is that
What are we going to say now? Go on.
A couple of rednecks with a book due out saw the animal that's actually drawn on the front cover of the book, and
He does have an animal with breasts on the book that came out beforehand.
yeah, and he was due another one for a subject that nobody was interested in at the time.
Yeah.
With a cine camera, and despite the advances in technology and the amount of people looking for it since, the most noticeable thing about it is it's America and there's dollar signs attached to it, and I think it's a complete load of nonsense. That's where I've come after 55 years of my journey. No,
It is very interesting, and it's you see, as Brits, actually, anything that you're passionate about. Like Mike's passionate about BeastWatch, and if he gets funds and donations, that goes into BeastWatch, and it solely goes on the animals and their care, because that's how it works in the UK.
I used to be passionate about Patty as well, to be fair.
No, of course, but I'm just saying the difference between the two cultures, which is quite different. Whereas in the US, I've noticed you can be passionate about the subject, but also make it a mercantile adventure. I mean, where you are making money, where you're selling merch, where you're capitalizing on the thing that you're looking into, and nobody thinks it's weird. It's sort of just, that's cool.
Well,
and
yeah,
it's odd to me
yeah.
because I'm half in that zone and half out of it. I write books and I sell them. I try to make them as genuine as possible, without sensationalism, but there's also the aspect where you want people to know and hear about the book and buy it, and you're walking this fine line all of the time, and thankfully not falling into this content trap, but a lot of people do, and I think that's the main reason for what we see on Facebook and other places. They have pages, they have products, and content is needed constantly. Yeah. And where are they going to get it from?
Absolutely.
Sensationalism.
And it's exactly the same with anything that tries to provide entertainment. Actual research goes out the window, doesn't it? I mean, you can see that with paranormal investigations.
Oh, yeah.
I used to work with a ghost, and I've never heard a paranormal investigator come up with a story that even touches on that sort of thing. You know what I mean? And it's just like.
Did you say you used to work with a ghost?
I used to work with a ghost, yeah.
Not alongside. He wasn't in like accounts or something. It was a haunted premise or something like that.
At the same time, every morning we used to hear keys jangling.
Yeah.
We used to hear the metal doors clanging shut and being locked, metal gates that weren't there anymore. And he used to let himself on the ward, and we used to see him walk on the ward.
Oh, Victorian Hospital, of course.
Yeah. Yes. And one day I followed him, and followed him into what was in my days the dormitory area, and he just suddenly wasn't there anymore. I mean, a typical sort of stone recording, earth recording.
The stone recorder, yeah.
Whatever you want to call it. I mean, that can't be replicated by science. You think there'd be thousands of people being seen. If that was the case, wouldn't it?
Is the problem, isn't it? How do you replicate that? And I've looked into that because I'm very skeptical about the ghost thing, and it's people who live in glass houses, right? But still, I'm quite skeptical about that side of things and ufology things, and that makes sense to me, the stone recorder, because the replay action, it's logical, but it seems to be, to me, like it's a get out of jail free card, essentially.
Ooh.
And if we could replicate it, I mean,
we don't understand how it happened, but
no, we don't.
It does seem to be the replay of someone's action repeated over many years. That's what it appears to be, and that is what my sighting certainly. And there were multiple witnesses, obviously.
Yeah, I've heard of things like that.
Other people could see it too, and when I was new to the ward, I was like, "Who's that?" And they go, "That's the ghost." What? But I mean, in those days, there were no mobile phones, there were no cameras in the place, and it was like, just got on with it.
You saw it. What did it look like? Did it look like just like a person, or was it translucent? Did it look like a faded image? That's what I'm wondering.
From what I remember, looked solid. All I remember was it was definitely a man, fairly big man in an overcoat. No facial features. but as soon as he came on the ward, he turned his back to us. I don't remember legs, but that doesn't mean he was gliding or anything. I seem to remember him, walking pace and stuff. I didn't see anything particularly unusual about it, apart from the fact he wasn't there. That was the only
That's a
unusual
fairly unusual part of it.
Yeah, fairly unusual, yeah. But I mean, not the only ghost story related to the asylum, nor my nursing career. But I mean, that was certainly quite a memorable one, but not scary, and that was in daylight. Lights on. We didn't have to turn all the lights off and put night vision goggles on and run around screaming to actually see it. So it wouldn't have made good telly.
It's amazing how much that night vision helps the fear.
Oh, well, yeah.
Because they can't see anything. The cameraman's the guy with the night vision. Everybody else is in the dark, crapping their pants, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, the thing I've seen most in night vision in my 55 years is probably Yvette Fielding. Despite the number of animals I've looked for.
There's a great Billy Connolly sketch actually on. He does the impression of the guy. He's dead now, isn't he? The Scouse guy used to talk to the guy. The spirit guy next to him.
Derek.
And it's Eric, and it was weird because he's got sort of he's got that sort of aura of a Scouse drag act about him somehow.
Oh, very.
Or he had it,
Yeah, definitely.
Weirdly, and you could see he'd been I had a feeling that he was once like a Butlin style performer at some point in his career. You get that weird feeling if you've been to them kind of holiday camps when you were a kid. That weird feeling about Redcoat sort of feeling about him. Does that make sense to you? It's ringing a bell, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. A dreadful, very poor entertainer. Yeah.
Basically.
I'm a charlatan, of course, a complete charlatan.
Yeah, well, we're talking like.
I went to see a stage show once.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Did you ever see the comedian? I forget his name now. And he used to one of these method actor types, where he would completely embody a character, and I can't even. He did a fake psychic show, basically. It's one of his acts that he did in this. I don't even remember his name anymore. And he would basically find out all the names of the people in the audience, and then ask them, if you lost anybody recently, and or he'd just shout things at the audience, and he'd say, Sharon, and some girl would say, I'm Sharon, and he'd say, I feel your shame, I feel your pain, but you're not to blame. How are you to know that dogs couldn't feed themselves? You deserve that holiday. And he'd move on to the next one and say something really, completely untoward. It was amazing. And for half of it, you could see that he had them. They weren't getting that he was basically mocking them for entertainment, which was horrible. I know. I'm not saying there's nothing there, but again, talking about the religious perspective on things, that's often really affected by your outlook and your view and what you want things to be. And
I've got no spiritual view. I don't believe in a life after death. I don't think ghosts are, lost souls. Because I don't think there's anything beyond death.
Yeah.
Possibly, it's a nice thought that consciousness somehow lives on after death, but there's nothing to suggest it does, and no reason to suggest why we'd be different to any other animal or plant or on the planet. And it would be a very crowded place, of course, because we've got 99% of all species that have ever been on the planet are now extinct. So it's a very crowded place. So no, it's not based with any sort of bias like that. So
no,
if somebody has those views, it does influence what they think, which is evident when you hear some paranormal people speaking as well.
Yeah,
we had a anecdote time. We had an all-night vigil on Cannock Chase a few years back, which we used as a BeastWatch training exercise.
Yeah,
in some respects, like radio training and map work and
great
basic orienteering and stuff. But of course, Cannock Chase is just it's just amazing, isn't it? It's a beautiful place, and it is a hotbed of mysterious goings on and stuff.
That to me, I feel like going to Cannock Chase is I'm not for you guys, but I know a lot of people have gone there to report a lot of things, but the amount of tension and focus that's on it for the myriad variety of different phenomena.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It does seem to me sometimes like, you know, riding the ghost bus in London when you come to London and going to all the haunts and expecting to see something, because it's a sort of it's not a tourist a facility, but it's got that aspect to it. The same way that Loch Ness has.
It's like Loch Ness, you know.
Yeah.
Why have I not seen the monster? You know, we've paid a lot of money for this trip.
Yeah, exactly.
We still haven't seen the monster. So after I pushed a load of black-eyed kids out of the way, I went looking for snakes, as I do.
Oh,
you know,
cool.
yeah, it was a great place for that.
Of adders or grass snakes?
Adders.
Yeah.
I saw some adders anyhow.
Awesome.
And then we all hit the pub, but we were joined by a load of psychics that night, and it was like, okay, let's bring it on. So you know, I wasn't expecting us to catch a werewolf or anything particularly.
No.
You know, that wasn't. You know, I didn't have room in the shed for one or anything, so I hadn't made any.
Kick the tanukis out anyway. Make room for your new werewolf.
Stocked up on steak or something before I went.
They're all right when it's normal, but it's a full moon you got to worry about.
Yeah.
The rest of the time you keep them in the house.
Yeah.
Shit, tie and everything.
They and to be honest with you, the funny bunch, and I can't remember who they were, to be honest with you, but we ended up with a situation where they were coming back from a certain area. I mean, we were there all night, literally overnight, and I could sit on Cannock Chase all night on my own, and I wouldn't be bothered by anything, to be honest with you. Apart from people, I'd rather there were no people about. That's what you got to really worry about, is the people. But otherwise, it won't bother me. But they came like rushing back from this part of the woodland, and like, oh no, you can't go down there. That's like, you know, oh no, we need to move from this area. There's a real bad presence. And it's like, why are we here? That's exactly where we need to be then, isn't it? You know, and they weren't happy about it, but they set up one of these, you know, these badly tuned in radios that are supposed to pick up.
Oh yeah.
Voice from the dead, EVPs or whatever.
EVP.
Yeah. And well, that was none. I listened to that. That entertained me for about 33 seconds. And I kind of got the impression there wasn't going to be anything conclusive coming from this. So yeah, I basically went off looking for black-eyed kids, you know, hoping I could catch one. But it was.
Did you find any snakes? I mean, that's the question.
Yeah. Well, I had another experience down on Cannock Chase, which was really, really quite strange, if you like, and which I have added to our documentation as possible big cat. Yeah, that was a bit of a weird one. I just in the year before COVID hit, some friends I do visit Cannock Chase with occasionally to look for snakes sent me some pictures saying, thought you might be interested in this, and there were pictures of lots of large animal bones within a small area, obviously from different, for more than one dead animal. I was like, well, yeah, well, all right, that's a bit weird, sort of thing. I said, well, it does get weirder. We've got some other pictures, and they sent me these other pictures, which were like of women's clothes on coat hangers in these bushes, with like suggestive notes on them and stuff, and it was like, oh great, you know, that's nothing to do with big cats. Yeah,
sounds ominous.
Well, definitely, but it does lend an important aspect to the story, because I went down there, not specifically, but I had some free time, so I actually went down there on my own to look for some snakes. I thought I'll check this out. I knew where it was, so check it out. And there's just a little lay-by at the side of the road, and you literally walk through a gap in the bushes into like a a chamber, a completely enclosed wooded chamber, and there weren't many bones about. There were a few small animal bones knocking about. You know, I wasn't even really thinking that, you know, I'm there for some sort of big cat investigation or anything like that. It was just really, I'll check this out, and then, you know, I'm going to go look for some snakes. And there were these, I say women's clothes. I can't imagine any women being seen dead in them, to be honest with you. But quite clearly, I think there were some individuals who enjoy dressing up in bushes, and who don't have much taste in clothing, because, I mean, these had been hanging there for some time. They had mold on them, growing on them, you know, moss growing on them. So
thankfully they weren't in current use.
Well, yeah, well, I certainly hope not. Anyhow, I was exploring. There was like a way out of this little chamber to the side, and I could hear walking towards me, as in getting louder, a quadruped. I could hear it breathing, and I must have been downwind of it. When I checked, I would have been downwind of it, so it was completely oblivious to me. And it was walking towards me, and it sounded, to all intents and purposes, I thought, oh Christ, it's some bloody stupid Labrador is going to come bouncing through here any minute, and there's going to be an owner behind it. And I'm not going to start explaining who I am when I'm stood in these bushes surrounded by all these women's clothes in an obvious dogging area, and suggest I'm really interested in big cats, and I'm just looking for bones.
Sounds like a euphemism. Yeah,
you got to be careful what you use. Anyhow, I'd sort of gone halfway through this this way out the back of the bushes, and thought, I'm not going to get caught here, because it was literally just as wide as I was to get through. And I thought, you don't know what a dog's going to be like when you
well, if you surprise them, and once they're older, I mean, it can be very defensive. Sure.
So I thought, I will move back and make room for it at least. And I moved back, and I must have made a noise moving back, and the sounds just stopped. Stopped completely. It was deadly silent. There wasn't a bird song, anything. There was nothing. Stopped completely. Didn't hear anyone whistle for the dog. Didn't hear a dog run away. Didn't hear anything move. The noise just stopped from a what seemed like a fairly heavy-bodied, like I say, in my mind's eye, I had some sort of Labrador-sized dog. I could hear it breathing, walking towards me. The noise just stopped, and I did what any BeastWatch volunteer would do without hesitation. And I thought, this is weird, so I went through the bushes to check it out. And it opened up. It opened up in a big wide woodland, but a very dense canopy. There was no branches up until probably about 10 foot, so you could see all the way around, but there was a complete ceiling on it. Really weird, really, completely covered over the top. But I could, you know, and the trees weren't big trees. You know, there weren't something, you know, an animal could just step behind and I wouldn't see it. And I was filled with a sense of complete dread. I thought, I need to get out of here now. Never felt like that. I've been in the middle of nowhere loads of times on my own, and I just thought, I need to
get that predator vibe
out of here now. The only place I didn't look actually was up in the trees above my head. And I got out of there. Really, the van was only parked the other side of this bush. I didn't have anywhere to go, but I got out of there, got in the van, thought, fuck this, and I just drove off. But I only drove about half a mile down the road, and then I got out and I went looking for snakes in the middle of nowhere on my own, completely nonplussed by that.
Yeah.
And it was only later I thought, you know, I wasn't sat in a pub shaking and knocking whiskies back. I thought, what happened there? That was a bit weird. And I mean, it depends who you talk to. I mean, other people might put it down to other entities, of course.
Yeah,
But,
I mean your body went on to automatic pilot. You got a predator alert and you got out.
That's how it felt. I mean,
Yeah.
it may have been completely imaginary, but like I say, it's out of character for it to be imaginary without any stimulus. I mean, there was nothing, didn't see anything, didn't hear anything after that. Nothing else happened to me, but I knew I had to get out of there immediately.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was, I was scared. As soon as I got in the van, drove off, wasn't scared.
And also, for somebody with your experience, that's significant because you're not scared in the woods. You're comfortable, and
Yeah,
as you said before, you would stay all night there by yourself and not even worry. You can actually. So
it wouldn't really bother me. In fact, to be honest with you, when I was rooting through the bush, I was more concerned that I'd be found
with the women's clothes.
Yeah, in the bushes with women's clothes hung up.
Well, I mean, coming on the show and talking about it, you've obviously given yourself one hell of an alibi now. You're home free.
I feel much better getting that off my chest. But I wasn't even thinking big cats. In all honesty, even though that was why I was there, as soon as I saw, well, there's not really any bones to even look at here. They had, the tiny little bits of bone. Couldn't do anything with them. Couldn't even, nothing worth picking up or bagging or anything. And I wasn't even thinking big cat. And then it was just like, I can hear something walking towards me.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing story, and all the more convincing because of the opinions you hold on the subject, and for the frighteners, you get the frighteners. I'm actually impressed by that. Just before
briefly terrified, yeah.
Just before we wrap up, I've always wanted to know what's the strangest exotic breed you've had to go out and rescue. What's the strangest thing, like a one-off?
Oh, well, in terms of stuff I've actually had to go out and rescue, then that narrows it down a bit. I mean, we've certainly had some strange cases come up. It's been a good summer for them. We've had the couple of reports from the Lake District of a goose being swallowed whole, and crocodile sighting and stuff.
Yeah,
they're really quite good. I still like getting my teeth into stuff like that. One of the hardest things, to be honest with you, we've tried to rescue is dead bodies from canals and stuff. They're really, really tricky.
Animal bodies now we're talking about.
Dead animals, yeah. Been a couple of dead dog cases and stuff like that we've been involved in. So they're awkward and logistically difficult. If you're talking about an actual really weird animal,
like if you had to go out and find some sort of giant coconut crab in the Forest of Dean or something like that. That's what I'm thinking about.
Well, it was our respondent that found the roadkill porcupine.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, there was supposed to be 3 of them. But I sent that information to DEFRA because we got a team on the ground looking for that, and it was one of our responders that found it as roadkill. That's quite unusual. You don't get a lot of them. We've had a team on a marmoset sighting, which actually started off as a Facebook post, and we took very careful analysis of the video, and we agreed it was the real thing. It was definitely a marmoset running about, and they heard its calls while they were down there. They were playing calls, and it was answering the calls. Never saw anything. That never came of anything. Wallabies are one of the most difficult things to effectively hang on to the tail of and keep hold of. They've got very, very strong legs. They're very difficult. I'm no longer intimidated by geese or swans. Doesn't matter who they are. But
cobra geese.
It's very, very difficult. That I mean, we had a team in London that responded to an abandoned snake, which we were basically analysing the video footage that had been and we were saying this. If this is a snake, this is one huge snake. This is 20 odd feet.
Really?
This,
or like a rock python or something?
yeah, I mean, this is, you know, a real thick-bodied snake. You know, you got to be careful here. This is, and it was, it was a flood barrier. Just the way it had been filmed.
Yeah.
Was very convinced. We couldn't tell, and we had to respond.
Wow.
So sometimes it's the more dubious ones that you.
I mean, it was perhaps
the most memorable.
Yeah, it was good that it turned out to be something else, really, for the team.
Yeah.
In that case, yeah.
20-foot
rock python could, or whatever the species is, could certainly be difficult to handle.
Absolutely, yeah. very, very difficult to restrain. You know, we've. It was warm weather as well, of course, so it would have been quite active.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, our cases do vary, but typically we deal with a lot of bird cases that's been impacted by the avian flu pandemic. You know, that's a real big one for us. You know, we're talking about real practical stuff now. You know, all cryptozoology jokes aside. You know, by the time you've dealt with 4 or 5 phone calls about injured pigeons and stuff, you know, anything becomes remarkably welcome as different, you know, even if it's just a corn snake loose. So you don't always get the variety, but like I say, we do still get the odd interesting report. You know, the skunk cases are always good. They keep you on your toes. A lot of exotic birds going missing, but in terms of searches and captures, you got to be very lucky. Most of them are never ever seen again, which is
really
sad. Yeah, you know.
Do you think they're predated upon, or they just fly off and make their way into the?
Well, some of them. I mean, if you're talking about, you know, species that could survive, like eagle owls and other owl species, eagle species, hawk species, and stuff, then they can possibly hold their own if they're not handicapped by wearing jesses and stuff and having lines attached. But your parrots and your budgies and your canaries and
they're not going to make
all that stuff. No, I mean that's literally just feeding the native population. Which is pretty sad, really. But there's not much hope for them. So to the extent where we've had to recategorize how we deal with bird cases, because there was just that.
It's a lot of man hours and power for little results.
Well, absolutely, yeah. So we had to put our efforts where it was best paying off, really.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but I mean, it's sad. You know, we will still respond if there's a possibility of recapturing an animal.
Absolutely. And I'd love to see you guys take on an eagle owl and get that back in the cage. Goodness. Well, what's that? 3.5 feet high or something like that?
What they were doing, and ideally have the owner involved. I like to get the owners to the front of the queue. Stuff like that.
Well, the predatory birds for sure. I actually just saw a beautiful kestrel the other day. There's a little old reservoir that's disused now. They're going to build on it, so they've drained a lot of it out, and they've left it, and all the grasses have grown back up. So it must be full of rats and bits and pieces next to the Thames. And just sitting on there on one of the columns was this beautiful kestrel. As I walked past, he kind of looked at me, and I stood there looking for like half a minute. He was just like, "I'm not bothered. You're not worrying me, mate. I'm just hanging out here for a bit till I get my sights on some lunch down there." And there's some wonderful, beautiful things in the country, and including the guests that get out from time to time. You know, we're glad that you guys are there to deal with it. Just quickly before we wrap up, Mike, how can people find you, and how can they get involved with helping BeastWatch UK and National Exotics?
Well, we're always after volunteers, and experience isn't vital, although we do take in people who are already rehabbers, people that run rescues and sanctuaries. We've even got some zoos involved with us. And you can volunteer through our Facebook group, which is National Exotics Animal Rescue Services, or you can get in touch with us on the 3Ws, beastwatch.co.uk, which will take you to our website, where there's all information about all the roles that are available for volunteers, and information about us and about me, and the other people that work with me. And we also now have a sister page which is related purely to fundraising, so that's going to be documenting some merchandise that's available, and some regular fundraising posts, and posts that have fundraising directly linked to specific animals that are in our care, for vet fees and ongoing husbandry and things like that. So that's under the same name, National Exotics Fundraising. So yeah, and we have new members join the Facebook group every week. They seem to be pouring in from somewhere. I'm not too sure where they come from sometimes. I usually ask, where did you hear about us? Why? And don't really get much of back, but it's always interesting to hear that, because I'm always intrigued, because I always.
Well, I think it's got it has an attractive logo, and it stands out. There's something about it that immediately tells you what the organization is about when you see it, and that's handy for people, especially when they're surfing online and coming across things. It's clear. And for those like-minded individuals, I would suggest getting involved and giving Mike a call, buying some of the products, because that always helps them. Vet bills, I'm sure, are astronomical for you guys, even though you probably have a few friends in the trade. I'm sure it's even friends' prices will set you back a bit.
There's nothing cheap, and of course we have been hit by the cost of living crisis. That's evident with more people wanting to surrender their animals, people abandoning their animals, and even the likes of us who keep the animals not really wanting any more animals. So that comes to a bottleneck eventually.
Yeah.
And certain organisations are withdrawing the funding from certain really valid programs, which is going to have a knock-on effect and stuff. So yeah, we're
That's sad to hear.
pitch,
Yeah.
and animal rescue is always going to be struggling for funds, and you can't do anything free these days, unfortunately.
Well, I think it's very worthy, and I think get involved, or just hop on and chuck Mike a fiver here and there to help out with the cost. Mike Potter, thank you so much for coming on again. It's always awesome to pick your brain and drag you into my cryptozoological world and get your theories as well. It's been great to.
I'm looking forward to retiring to a cryptozoological world myself.
Are you?
Definitely.
Mythological or cryptozoological?
I actually think I was hypnotized and probably keelhauled or shanghaied into this this particular role. So yeah.
Okay.
As soon as I can
great.
escape, then yeah, I'll be.
Come back to us. We need more skeptics. We need more decent, reasonable skeptics. So come back to us.
Much safer running around looking for stuff that doesn't exist. It's
well, look, I mean, yeah, Bigfoot sightings are few and far beyond. And if you've got any suggestions as to how we could get one in the cage or something, we definitely appreciate that.
Catch pole and dog crate.
Sure, find me in a tree somewhere. Okay, Mike, awesome, lovely to talk to you. Speak to you soon, my friend.
Talk to you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.